Welcome back to Sunrise. It is 29 minutes to 9. We're continuing our focus on the education, which is what the Economic Summit Group is focusing on. We're still coming to you live from Abuja, venue of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group's meeting. We're joined now, as you might have seen in the welcoming slide there, by Tom Rudmik, who is the CEO and co-founder of Profound Learning Institute, as well as this Massachusetts Academy and College in Canada. They are Research Development School. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Let's take it from what you spoke yesterday
Yes.
at this conference. So you were talking about, there's a part where you spoke on fixing what's broken. Tell us about that.
Yes. I've been traveling around the world, speaking to countries and talking about education. And there's basically two areas that we have to focus in on. The system itself is a very complex system. Transforming education is a very difficult task. And so I've shared or advocated a two-step process. One is to identify those parts of the system that can more readily be fixed. It's analogous to having a car that has a flat tire. Fix what is obvious. Fix the flat tire. Fix the problem. And that is more kind of the obvious surface level. You've got issues, major issues in Nigeria around literacy. There are fixes for those things that you can do. Yeah. The second part is the more difficult one, and that is to transform what is obsolete. And again, using the car metaphor, if the car is obsolete, if our world no longer requires cars, and maybe a better analogy is to use the horse and buggy. When the horse and buggy became obsolete because the world needed a different mode of transportation. Yeah. I'm mixing up transformation, transportation. When a different mode of transportation was required, we had to invent or create a brand new system of transportation, hence the automobile. Education as we know it today is an obsolete system. It was designed for the industrial age. It was designed to equip students or create a workforce for the factories where students would conform, comply, and meet standards. The world has changed. Just as it had changed at the advent of the industrial age when the horse and buggy had to be reinvented into the automobile, the world now, from an educational perspective, is changing where the primary competitive advantage is found in our abilities to innovate, to create, to design. The traditional model of education actually diminishes those important capabilities that is required to be competitive. This summit is about global competitiveness, and it's a major challenge. But trying to catch up to the world, and what I mean by that, the Western world, maybe being a leader in all of Africa, is not necessarily going to create the competitiveness that one is looking for. And the reason for that is countries like Canada, like the United States, Singapore, they are looking at their system. We are looking at our system. The message I bring is the same one I bring here. The system is obsolete. Even though we're one of the best in the world, we need to transform into that future, as I just mentioned.
So do we then, in the lines of the second point, second process, which is transforming what's obsolete, can the first one, which is fixing what's obvious, be subsumed in the second, in our case?
I think you can look at it as a dual-pronged process.
Okay.
You can't ignore some of the obvious problems. And you need to bring initiatives to begin to address some of the obvious problems. But when it comes to system transformation, it is a much more difficult task. There's so many changes that need to take place in the thinking of people. It's actually why I wrote my book, Becoming Imaginal, Seeing and Creating the Future of Education. It requires a different kind of leadership. And the word imaginal comes from nature. It's when a caterpillar transforms or goes through metamorphosis into a caterpillar or into a butterfly. there are these imaginal cells within the caterpillar that have the abilities to become the butterfly. And so what we have been doing, we've been coming back now, this is my 5th time back in Nigeria in the last year,
Wow.
is that we have been looking for imaginal leaders. We did an Imaginal Leaders Transformation Workshop last November, where we began to take leaders of schools, began to expand their abilities to see the future butterfly, and then begin to help them put a process of transformation in place. We came back just a month ago and began training 70 teachers to become transformation agents within their schools. About 15 schools were represented. And so the transformation process isn't a system-wide, let's just change everything. We start with some early adopter schools. We began to demonstrate that transformation is possible. Think of it, maybe in 5 years we might have 1,000 schools. Well, that 1,000 schools, or those 1,000 schools, could become a magnet for the rest of the system. It begins to pull the system into the future to show that it actually is possible. But to do a system-wide transformation, it is virtually impossible.
Is it possible to do that transformational process within a bigger system? Now, let's look at the educational system that's operating in Nigeria. I'm sure you already know the 6234 system. Now, with this transformation, is it going to work within that system, or are we talking about a gradual process to changing the entire system? How would that work?
You know, the honest truth of it is, I don't know, and nobody really knows. But here's what we do know about general transformation and in the world we live in today. First of all, there is what is called a Metcalfe law. It's a law of networks. It's a law of the power of networks, or the number of nodes. And it's an exponential law that says if you reach a tipping point, which is around 10%, then you have the power within the network to cause transformation to occur. And so in a mathematical, theoretical sense, we need a 10% adoption rate to affect the entire system. However, there's some other things that have come into play, such as social media. You look at what happened in Egypt, the Arab Spring. In a very short period of time, you had the toppling of an entire government by people rising up using social media. And so things today can happen much more rapidly using things like social media that were never thought of or even thought possible even a few years ago. And so given some of the new tools that are in place in society and the new systems that are at play, it is possible that to see a social change, such as in education, it could occur much quicker than a 10 or 20-year time frame. But I'm not necessarily saying that in 3 to 5 years we can change the entire system. What we can do in 3 to 5 years is to demonstrate that a different kind of learning model is possible. And how quickly that is pervasively adopted, time will tell.
You know, fixing what's broken, that is why we're here. I'm sure that's the essence of this talk. And perhaps the stage we are, let's use your analogy, is the caterpillar stage.
Yes.
In trying to see how we can make that caterpillar that seemed ugly become beautiful into a beautiful butterfly in the future, what are the processes when we say we're already in a state and a fix, but now we're trying to fix what's already broken? So how do we drive this process to become a beautiful butterfly?
It's the notion of trying to find what I call the imaginal leaders, the imaginal selves. Not everyone, whether it be in politics or whether it be in education, actually have the ability or the desire or even the interest to see transformation occur. And so it's trying to find those special, what we call imaginal leaders that have that propensity or have that fundamental desire to be part of making a difference in their world. And so it's not necessarily pervasive that you can go across Nigeria to find that they're pervasively found. The other thing is to understand that the system itself is adverse to transformation. Systems, by definition, are designed to maintain themselves. Systems have all kinds of feedback loops and reinforcing loops designed to maintain balance. The government itself doesn't have, and I'm talking generally around the world, not just in Nigeria, governments do not have the abilities to go out and be radical with their message because it won't get them elected. And so the governments and the political system by nature is designed to maintain the status quo and just maybe incrementally improve that caterpillar. And so there requires, or what is required is some kind of a bold leader to step forward and to say, we need radical changes. And that bold leadership needs to be at the government level, it needs to be at state levels, federal and state levels, it needs to be at the cities and major school districts, public schools and private schools. And that requires a lot of courage to be able to come out and saying, not only are we going to fix the problems, not only are we going to put running shoes on the caterpillar to make a obsolete system more efficient, we need to truly transform it. The challenge we have is the word transformation is used very broadly and loosely. Transformation by definition means a major change in form and function. Yet people use the word transformation to define any kind of change. You know, putting running shoes on a caterpillar to make it more efficient is not transformation. It's just adding efficiency to an obsolete system.
Wow. And if you look at what we have already, perhaps yesterday during the session, what we got was partnership. Government has a part, the private sector has a part. I'm also thinking of the young ones who were also there yesterday, the students. How can they be part of this transformation process?
Well, for me, it does boil down to private and public partnerships, and I think it is vital. I think it is vital to have the government recognize the need to have prototypes that are in place and are developing new systems and to support those prototypes. And those prototypes, at least in Nigeria, the private school sector seems to be more ready to engage in some of this thinking and to have public support or governmental support in even looking at the testing regimen and some of the requirements that are policies are in place, or even curricular redesign. All of these are public-private initiatives that can take place and to demonstrate that in a small scale, major change can actually occur effectively.
When I see you talk about, in your book, Becoming Imaginal, about leaders that have the capacity to see the future and pull it into now,
yes,
creatively. How can we do that through research?
Well, I do believe that there is an innate ability, call it even a God-given ability, that we all have to become imaginal, to become those leaders that see the future and be able to pull it back. I think it's innately placed into every human being. The challenge we have is in education, the system of conform and comply. It actually diminishes the neurological pathways that are required for creative thinking. Studies have shown in the neuroscience area that the longer you stay in school, the less creative capacity, I'm talking neurologically, that a human being has. And so becoming imaginal, a long-term response is we have to change education. We have to get away from testing and one answer only and creating conditions in which students become creators and designers of the future. That's the long-term answer. The short-term answer is, and I'll give it a tongue-in-cheek answer, is, well, read my book. I've got 5 keys of how to become imaginal. That is why I wrote my book, is that it's a capability that I think is innately there, but requires some development. And to be able to pull that capabilities to be a seer. Steve Jobs was a seer of the future. He disrupted 4 major industries. He was an imaginal leader. And I believe there's much more of that, capability around. We just need to develop it.
It requires development. I know you said we should read the book, but we might need a little bit of a breakdown here. You believe in the in a training system, what you believe in is to inquire, train the students to inquire, to improve, innovate, and invent.
Yes.
That's like what you work with. Now, in developing that, how should it begin? How does it work with the students? I mean, we had the students here yesterday. How would it begin with them? Sulaiman asked, how can those students be part of this future?
Yeah. It's hard for me to answer that specifically in terms of Nigeria, but let me answer that in terms of what we're actually doing in our prototype school.
Sorry if I'm coming in. Could you just assume or pretend we have a student here and you're going to train that student to inquire, improve, innovate, and invent?
Okay. It's what we talk about in our model of education is developing learning adventures. A learning adventure is a very engaging project, if you wish. The teacher needs to set the conditions for the student to become a designer, a creator. And so you create a project. And I'll give you an example. We had a project where we had 200 students, a mass project where students were designing life on Mars 2028. And now they're designing life in terms of sustainable housing. How do you create a sustainable house on Mars? So you have to have engineering capabilities. You have to design political systems for 2028 in Mars. But you had to understand what would Earth be like in 2028, because that would influence Mars in 2028. And so you place students into projects that require them to start to think about the future and start to create solutions for the future. A person cannot be a designer without having a design experience. I could read a book about being a golfer. It doesn't make me a golfer. I have to go up, put a golf club in my hand, and I have to swing and try and hit the ball and learn how to hit the ball properly. If we want students to be innovators and inventors, we have to create experiences in the school that gives them the opportunity to put into practice the skills of what a designer needs to go through. There's an 8-step process for creation. Well, you design a project that includes those 8 steps, and the students begin to inquire to acquire those abilities. And so it's creating conditions in which those roles or those capacities are developed.
You know, there's this tendency for people to have the essence of research lost on them, because major corporations in the world today, they lay a lot of emphasis on research. How do we begin to get that focus back on research, the role that research plays in us moving forward?
Yeah, yes, and education really doesn't have a structure where research and development occurs. At universities, they will have professors, they might research the effect of lighting on student learning. Okay. Or they'll have some specialty area, but to research how an entire system could or should operate really doesn't exist. And so one way that this could happen is to have special designations for schools that would come forward, and the government can say, we want to have a special project, we want to have special fundings, and we want to designate certain schools to have or to be given research and development responsibilities. And for them, they would have special privileges and maybe even special funding, but also special requirements. And so you could work with early adopter schools or research schools on specific projects, okay, and begin to support that through various means from the government.
All right, that's interesting. I was going to ask how it works with masters, but at the time of this one, we have to really thank you for coming on. Tom Rudmik is the CEO and co-founder of Profound Learning Institute. He's as well as Masters Academy and College in Canada. They focus on research development. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
All right, then we're back in just a moment here. Please join us again.